James Bond squares off against the evil SPECTRE organization in a pulse-pounding race to seize the Soviet Lektor decoding machine. His mission thrusts him into a thrilling boat chase, a brutal helicopter attack, and a deadly brawl aboard the Orient Express, proving once again that Agent 007 can't be stopped. Making its premiere on the 10th of October 1963 in London and opening in the USA several months later on the 8th of April 1964, From Russia with Love is the second James Bond film and cost $2 million to make and brought in $78.9 million. Starring Sean Connery, directed by Terence Young, the vital statistics are conquests 4, martinis 0, kills 17, James Bonds 0. Variety said, From Russia with Love is a preposterous, skillful slab of hard-hitting, sexy hokum. After a slowish start, it is directed by Terence Young at a zingy pace. I'm your host, James Page from MI6HQ.com and the magazine MI6 Confidential, and welcome to a special episode of James Bond and Friends Debrief. This week we are doing From Russia with Love to coincide with it being released in cinemas in the UK, and today I am joined by Bill Koenig, David Leigh, and Sean Longmore.
Hokum is a word that should come back more, isn't it?
Right.
That's a great word.
What's funny is, in the Variety reviews of the first 7 or 8 films, it's used in every single one of them. So.
When I was in high school, I actually looked up the original 1963 reviews, and they were really positive. People really liked it.
So first category is the one with. So what is the motif you could hang your hat on for this film? If you imagine a minimalist poster or the one thing that stands out, if you close your eyes, what's the thing you see or hear when you think of From Russia with Love? So the one with, and who would like to go first?
Can I go first? The one with Fleming's World.
Ooh.
I think this is one of the best representations of Ian Fleming's world as depicted in the novels. I think it's really great.
Okay. I am going to go for the one with the stolen cipher machine.
Mm-hmm. You guys have taken the good ones there. My instinct was kind of to go be like, oh, it's the one with Russia and the one with the Soviet Union, but actually that's kind of a sort of backseat to it all. It's the one with the espionage, really, isn't it? It's the biggest sort of Cold War thriller out of all of them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a good one, Sean. So the meat of this conversation is around the Bond cocktail. So a lot of people I've tried to break down the Bond formula into several categories. We've got teaser, titles, plot, women, villains, allies, Bond himself, action, locations, dialogue, and style. Which of these ingredients for From Russia with Love do you think is somehow unique to this particular film, and why? What's special about it for this film? And it could be positive or negative. So who would like to pick an ingredient from the cocktail?
Can I? Because I would go with teaser, because in a way it was kind of accidental, because Peter Hunt in the editing bay changed the order of some sequences, and that's how what we now consider the pre-title sequence got created. Because originally that sequence was not supposed to be first. This is according to the making of featurette on the home video. So this started that whole tradition. So I would go with teaser.
I think From Russia with Love is a really good example of explaining to people how filmmaking is 3 parts. 1 part's writing, 1 part's shooting, and 1 part's editing.
Yes.
And this film really lent into editing being a key component of it. With him, Peter Hunt fixed several scenes, didn't he? And reorganized the story, as you say, which was, not director Terence Young's original vision for the film.
No, which is actually a credit to Young. I would say the fact that he let Hunt do that. I mean, they were friends, so that explains a lot of it. But again, that's why I put teaser.
And it's the first of several instances we come to learn in the series where Bond's death is faked or is a fake out, or an audience is tricked about Bond's fate.
Right. What do you think
audiences thought of it back in the day?
But I think that may have been a Harry Saltzman idea. I mean, Saltzman seemed to be obsessed by this, but I think that that was a Harry Saltzman idea to start with.
Yeah, I mean What did audience of the time think? Well, they saw with their own eyes that James Bond had just been killed, but I can't believe they really thought that. There was a bit more of the film to go.
Well, I'll tell you, I saw it as a 13-year-old in 1971 as part of a double feature, and it's like I didn't think he was really killed, but like I was shocked. They sucked me in. Let me put it that way. It's like it was something I was not expecting.
Wait till you get to No Time to Die.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, I know. Well, yeah, but I wasn't.
People getting up and leaving the theater all distraught.
But I wasn't 13-year-old with No Time to Die. It's I was 13-year-olds when I saw From Russia with Love. Like, what? Whoa!
Do you think there was any sort of when that sequence was produced? Was there any sort of basis on the end of the book for that?
Oh, that's a good point.
No, there wasn't, because, and I can say this because I saw the movie first in 1971, and then I read the book later in 1971 because there was a reissue of a few Ian Fleming titles, and it's like, no, that's strictly a filmmaker thing.
What are you getting at, Sean? Is that maybe they came up with the idea because of the cliffhanger?
Yeah, maybe they were playing on people that had read the book, so they were like, right, we're going to get it out of the way and kill him straight away and then fake it out. So maybe it kind of like sets up that idea that maybe James Bond can die subconsciously.
It could have been quite a subconscious influence, though. Absolutely, yeah. I like that idea.
Very possibly. Very possibly.
I mean, obviously, other than setting up Red Grant as a threat, it means nothing to the story. Right?
Yeah. But the thing is, it's so short. It's like 2 minutes, 1 minute, 52 seconds. That's excellent. So
I think it's the shortest of the series.
Yeah. But it really does psych you up for what comes as a first-time viewer. Let me put it that way. It really psychs you up for what comes after.
All right. Teaser. Good point, Bill. First one of the series, and they kind of hit it out of the park. Who wants to go for another cocktail ingredient?
Oh, well, I can kind of play on that, I guess, I'm going for style, the cheeky style that can mean basically anything, I guess. But in terms of visual style of the film, and in particular sort of cinematography, you kind of get a bit of a pivot from Dr. No. And I guess the production design, not having Ken Adam, kind of played to this as well, where you suddenly get a much more Hitchcockian style looking film. There's much more sort of people in shadows. It's not as sort of bright and technicolor as Dr. No is, and it kind of it does an about turn from Dr. No, where that can occasionally feel sort of comic booky in a way, particularly towards the end with the fight with Dr. No. This kind of suddenly you're grounded in a very real looking world.
Also, just to reinforce what Sean just said, in terms of style, when Bond arrives at the Istanbul airport, that scene is played or is staged in a similar fashion to as when Bond arrived at the Kingston airport, but there were a few differences. But it's like if you had seen the first two movies, it would seem very familiar to you, but it's like there are key differences. Because, okay, the guy who meets Bond is really his ally, not a fake ally like Mr. Jones was in Dr. No. Do you get what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, given that they were the same production team, Sean, is what you're saying that there must have been a conscientious decision?
I don't know if it was conscious or just something that happened sort of accidentally. I guess the sort of conscious decision was to focus on going back to the sort of script and the book. It's kind of From Russia with Love is one of the more grounded stories anyway. But I guess it's just kind of it's that, again, playing up to that thing of espionage and spy and sort of saying James Bond is a real character in the real world rather than being a superhero kind of character. And that's kind of really told really well through the cinematography, through the color, through the set and production design. It's all very grounded throughout, but shot really sort of elegantly and poetically. And I like what you were saying there, Bill, as well, about the sort of symmetry with it matching up with Dr. No in terms of the airport. And you're right, I guess someone watching that for the first time, having seen Dr. No, will be like, oh, where's this going?
David, would you like to pick one?
Yeah, well,
from the cocktail recipes.
Yeah, for me, I think this is Sean Connery at peak Bond, because after Dr. No, they knew that it wasn't a one-off, but it's also, because it's before Goldfinger, he plays Bond without being the in a less kind of knowing way, and I think by Goldfinger it was a bit too much, and it was like he was in on the joke that that Bond was this big phenomenon. And I think in From Russia with Love, there's the thing in his hotel room when he orders breakfast and green figs, yogurt, coffee, very black, and it's just I think Connery is fantastic in it. Really plays Bond very, very well, and for that reason, I think this actually is the best James Bond film.
It's a good one. I think I agree with you completely, Dave. And I think when he gets to Goldfinger, I mark that film down for the way Connery plays Bond as too comfortable and cocky and confident.
Yeah.
And self. Yeah, as you say, he's in on the joke by then in that film. Conversely, I kind of mark Dr. No down a little bit for his performance as Bond, because he plays Bond as kind of a little bit petulant and brash, and he gets irritated easily, and he's not as cool and calm as he should be. And I think you're right. From Russia with Love, he nails it. Absolutely nails it. And we've got to remember, I mean, these things were shot almost back to back, almost compared to today's schedule. They were shot back to back.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So, in fact, they started location shooting today on this day in 1963. I don't know how much, it obviously, Dr. No had been out in the UK. It hadn't opened in the US yet. And how much of that was Terence Young directing Connery differently, or Connery just feeling a bit more comfortable in his own skin at this point?
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I guess the first film, maybe he didn't think that the first film was going to work out so well, and everyone was surprised at how well Dr. No did. So that must give you a huge confidence boost, everybody. So, and there was more money around it as well, and so that all must make a difference.
Well, and also they knew that the novel was like this international success, and it was like on both sides of the Atlantic, because thanks to John F. Kennedy, which we'll talk about later, but it was like hugely successful, and like you had to know this movie was probably going to turn out pretty well at the box office, even when you were filming it. It was, there was just so much buzz around it. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Does anybody, seeing we've got a little time to play with, does anybody think of any of those elements that are the weak point of this film compared to the series on average?
I guess you could kind of look at the titles as being. I think they're a bit of an oddity. These ones, because they're by Robert Brownjohn rather than Maurice Binder. And you're playing with projection the whole way through, rather than sort of designed elements and layered film elements. So there's a sort of different style to the titles, and you also get an instrumental song, of course.
Right.
So I don't know if I never see the From Russia with Love titles topping anyone's title sequence list.
I do like the titles, Sean, but because it's projected, a lot of the time it's out of focus, and I think if it were done today, that they could do the same thing where they simulated projection onto a stomach, but actually. Use CGI to do it, so it's all in focus. I think that could work really well.
Well, I would just say, in terms of action, in terms of our checklist, just because, yes, I know back then you did rear projection, but like even then, I suspect it was kind of dodgy. With like when the helicopter goes down later in the film. There's just some real dodgy rear projection throughout the movie.
Yeah,
but
Venice on the canal.
Yes, that too. Yeah. So, but I mean, that's in my mind, that's a minor quibble, but
yeah, it's not something that's ever going to put me off a film.
Right, but you can't ignore it because again, again, Venice and other things,
I too had action on my list of weak points, Bill, but then I think of the train fight, and it kind of, to me, that pays for a lot of sins elsewhere in the film.
Yeah, but I was going to mention the train fight. I was split between that and Connery for my Bond cocktail because the train fight is so good, and there's nothing really in the series until Casino Royale like that. I think.
Yeah, the stairwell fight is
so
the equivalent.
brutal and it's claustrophobic. It's brilliant and helped by the editing.
Yeah. I think it's also kind of helped by the pace of what's come before it and the tension, because a great sort of action sequence, like you don't need lots of action in a film for it to be effective, but it feels earned in From Russia with Love. So there's like so much tension that comes up before it, and you're kind of like, what's going to happen? And then there's that point, there's that little sort of exchange between Red Grant and Bond in the carriage where it's all kind of unfolded. And you're kind of on the edge of your seat. You're ready for something to happen, and it kind of plays out a little bit longer than it should. And then when the fight happens, it feels really earned and really sort of rewarding to watch, rather than just being a punch up that's put in there for the sake of it.
Yeah. So compare that to Spectre, right? Where the dinner conversation is between Bond and Madeline, and there's no threat of tension, and then all of a sudden Hinks pops out of nowhere. And the fight is equally brutal, but it doesn't feel like it to me, compared to From Russia with Love, because you haven't, as you say, you haven't had that build-up of suspense and waiting for like the coiled spring,
Well, in terms of that build-up of suspense, like when you have Bond and Grant in the train compartment, and Bond he asks a question, and Grant just says, "Uh-huh," and then he asks another question, "Uh-huh." And then finally, like he says, "I don't mind talking," but like that dragged out the tension a bit. That's one of the things I watched before the recording, that sequence. But I mean, Robert Shaw is great in this film, so I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, moving on to underappreciated element. What thing, big or very, very small, would you like to bring to people's attention for the next time they watch this movie?
Okay, yeah. Can I go first on this?
Yep.
Because everyone knows that Grant should not have ordered red wine with his fish. Yeah.
Apparently,
yeah. Okay. He asked for Chianti, and the wine waiter asked if he wanted the white kind. He said no, the red. But Chianti is only a red wine. So the wine waiter was a fraud. So I don't know what he was doing there.
Maybe he was an MI6 agent who was undercover.
Or a KGB agent, and trying to work out what Spectre was doing with the Lektor. So,
well, actually, I can. Okay, so based on I was looking at random trivia for later on, but today I discovered one that was really kind of small. So I'm going to try and justify you this, David. In 1962, the Orient Express changed routes. And so the script was accommodated when they did the film to change the routes. So theoretically, if the Express changed routes, the staff on the train may have been new and might have not known what they were doing.
Oh yeah. So he was just training at the time.
Mm-hmm. We got trainee waiter. My goodness.
That's right. The waiter just nodded. Well, whatever you say, sir. Whatever.
Do you think, David, that Terence Young was a sophisticated guy, right?
Yeah, I know.
Do you think that they did the "Do you want the white or the red" to reinforce to the audience that he made a deliberate choice that Bond picked up on versus just asking for red wine?
No, do you know? I did wonder that because I thought that's something that Terence Young should have known. I thought, and I've looked into it because they tightened up all the regulations with Chianti a few years ago, and they used to be able to use white grapes in the wines, which I don't think they can do at all now. But I haven't found any evidence at all of ever them making a white Chianti. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe it was just a joke.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, this is new to me, David. You sprung this on me. I think that it might have just been a storytelling device to say white and red, make a choice. But then why use Chianti?
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
You know what? And they might have even done it on the set at last minute thing.
I'm Googling white Chianti now.
Yeah.
All right, that's a good one, David. Bill or Sean, underappreciated element.
Why? Man, underappreciated.
I can go.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sean.
It's not as good as David's, I'm afraid. But we touched it briefly earlier in the score, in the soundtrack. Not that the soundtrack's underappreciated because everybody loves it. But in particular, the new James Bond 007 theme that John Barry introduces. I really love it. I think it's fab, and it comes back, and I think it's a wonderful. It feels a little bit more adventurous, and it's a great. What Barry does so well in his scores is sort of comes back to leitmotifs all the time and uses sort of recognizable themes a lot, and it gives Barry a sort of extra thing to play with in his sandbox, to the point where when you get to something like Thunderball, he's then got 4 different melodies and leitmotifs to play from, and you get such a wonderful, rich score. So I think it was a really clever move by him to introduce that new little element here. And I don't think it gets.
Yeah, I really like
also
that too.
Not having to lean on Monty Norman.
Yeah,
creation. Yeah.
I'll go with underappreciated. Simply the fact they were able to bring in SPECTRE, and it was like a really hard thing to do. They were like rewriting well into production, and the fact they brought it on made it work. Like well into the filming. That was great.
Yeah. So for those who haven't read the book, SPECTRE was the name of the Lektor, and it was just Bond against the Russians, right?
Yes.
Right.
Now you've stolen my trivia item, though.
So just like Goldfinger, they, I think, improved upon the book in that sense by changing that element. Just like they changed Goldfinger's ultimate way he was going to do it, right? I think that's been lost to time a little bit, that people just assumed that it was SPECTRE was in from Russia 11. They weren't.
Well,
this was of the era where Fleming was calling everything SPECTRE, just so one of them would stick.
Yeah,
like Bond's pet cat would be SPECTRE.
Yeah, he was very, very fond of that word. Yeah.
Well, Maybaum and Company got Bond and Tatiana off the train a lot sooner than in the novel, and then they added these 2 outdoor sequences. So, yeah, it's a very faithful adaptation for, say, 2/3 of the movie, and then they made some major changes later.
Okay, Bill, underappreciated element. What you got?
You know what? Robert Shaw, because Grant was like a really hard character to do. Like Robert Shaw's Grant did not kill things, at the full moon, but no, he was fantastic, and he really made his Grant was like a really worthy opponent for Bond. So I'll leave it at that.
The Bond series has a history of the villains always claiming to be Bond's equal. Do you think Shaw's Red Grant is probably the true heir to that throne?
You know what? Grant had Bond on his knees and had a gun at him. So like that's as close as you're going to get to killing Bond.
Yeah. He also outplayed him for nearly all the film.
Yeah.
Right. He was running rings around him.
Yes, because there's that one scene where well, there were numerous scenes, but one scene in particular when they were on the train and like Grant is following Bond and there's this Barry music, da 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 da, and like it's like, boy, Grant really seems like he's got Bond's. He has Bond where he wants him for most of the movie.
He could have picked him off anytime he felt like, really, couldn't he?
Yeah. And that was the point where, where Grant reminds that he saved Bond's life at the gypsy camp.
A fun thing I read again while I was scrolling through trivia this afternoon. The Robert Shaw's performance in this was the reason that Spielberg cast him in Jaws, because Spielberg really liked Russia Love.
Yeah, it makes sense because Spielberg was a massive Bond fan.
Thankfully, never let anyone near the series. Okay, trivia. All right, there's a bunch of trivia online, but is there a particular fact or tidbit about the film that you personally find really interesting that you would like to share with everybody?
Can I go?
Yeah, because David's probably going to think of another one.
Okay.
Luckily, I do have a backup, so
okay.
Go ahead.
Well, it goes beyond just one thing, because it's very well known that John F. Kennedy listed From Russia with Love as one of his 10 favorite books, but the movie was also one of the last films he saw before he was assassinated. And also members of the Kennedy assassination, or who had been members of the administration. It's like in the spring of '64, Allen Dulles, who had been fired by JFK as CIA director, wrote a letter to Fleming, said, "Oh, I see now that From Russia with Love is a movie now. I don't go to many movies, but I'm going to go see this one." And I read that letter, so that's how I know this. So there's this association between Kennedy and From Russia with Love. It exists on many levels, so I'll leave it at that.
So I've been trying to research this bill for years, and the closest I've got is apparently it was the last film screened in the White House prior to him leaving to Dallas.
Yeah.
But getting any kind of paper trail to prove that has not been possible. And I've done FOIs, and I've even pinged Michael Beschloff and all these other kind of people, and nobody has documentary evidence other than hearsay.
You know what? I tried to do a search last night before this recording, and I tracked down one of Beschloss's tweets, and he said that in November of '63 that JFK saw both From Russia with Love and Tom Jones, both United Artists releases. Yeah. So, yeah, that's as best I could do.
I think the line I've seen on it is it's no closer than you guys really, but is it William Raymond Manchester's book, Death of a President?
Right. Yes,
it was screened on, I think it's like November 20th in the evening, because it was private screening, because obviously From Russia with Love didn't come out in America until '64. So he had a private screening on the 20th of November, and then he was assassinated November 22nd. So
Yes, and I think in that book it also says that when they were coming up with that list of the 10 favorite books, Pierre Salinger, who was JFK's press secretary, said, "Boss, we need one popular book," because the list was mostly political books, biographies of politicians, etc. It's like, we need something popular, and that's how that From Russia with Love got on the list.
It wasn't there necessarily by merit.
Right. Yeah, it was like staff work.
Sean, what's your little tidbit?
Oh, my little tidbit. So I went for so there was one that I picked that I figure is quite obvious, and I think a lot of people already know anyway, and that's the billboard that opens up at a mouth.
Damn you!
Sorry. Well, I'll leave that, and you take that. No, you take that, David, and I will go with something I discovered recently, because I took a little holiday to Venice, and it's a random bit of pub quiz kind of trivia. This that I spotted. So obviously, From Russia with Love takes part in Venice, Moonraker takes part in Venice, and Casino Royale takes part in Venice. They're all filmed. All the locations are pretty much very sort of central to St. Mark's Square. And the shot that's on the rear projection at the end of this is kind of at the very bottom base end of St. Mark's Square where the two columns are, which is also the same spot where Roger Moore drives the gondola up into St. Mark's Square. And also just a little bit further down the street, I believe, if I've got this right, there'll be someone out there that's probably telling me I've made the right dogs to know this, but it's where they filmed outside a hotel for Casino Royale. So there is one very kind of like small spot outside St. Mark's Square where technically three of the James Bonds have had some kind of encounter.
I'm so envious of you because we were actually going to go to Venice in, I think it was April or May 2020. So it was all booked, and then the pandemic kicked off. So we never made it to Venice. But I had all the Bond locations mapped out to do, and there was a ton just around that area.
Yeah, it took me by surprise. It wasn't because it wasn't a reason I went for going there, and I was just like, well, I'll check out a few Bond locations while I'm there. And it just so happened that I'd go to one, and then I'd be like, oh, there's one right there, and then there's one right there. But they're all from different movies, and they literally basically just filmed by St. Mark's Square in all three films.
Good stuff. All right, David.
Okay, right. So this is a joint one with Sean. So the trapdoor and Anita Ekberg's. Oh God, I still can't say it. Let's try this again. Anita Ekberg's mouth, and there's the trapdoor. The baddie escapes down a rope, and he's shot. In the book, it was Marilyn Monroe, and the advertising hoarding was Niagara. In the film, it was Call Me Buona, which was produced by. Was it produced by Harry Saltzman?
It was produced by
both of them,
and Saltzman.
Right, okay, it was both of them. Yes, but the trivia doesn't end there though, because Anita Ekberg, when I can say her name, was married to Rick Van Nutter.
Felix Leiter in Thunderball.
Yes, and that was also the first movie for Eon that John Steers worked on, because he did not work on Dr. No, but he did work on Call Me Buona, and then he got hired for From Russia with Love.
And
I'm jumping on your trivia for that.
No, and I can. I'm going even further from that. I found this on someone on Reddit wrote this, so I don't know the sort of accuracy of it, but they were claiming on there that apparently at the same time that Harry Saltzman was making Call Me Buona, he was also approached to produce A Hard Day's Night with the Beatles, and he had said something like, "Why would I want to produce a movie about the Beatles when I've got Bob Hope?" And of course, A Hard Day's Night, and he turned it down. And of course, A Hard Day's Night went on to be a big success.
Call Me Buona was also the last time Monty Norman actively worked with Bond producers.
You should have gone for that anyway, Sean.
Well, it was a group effort. We all did well.
Yeah, true.
All right, rounding up. Final round is the final verdict. Rather than asking people to tier, to rank their James Bond films, we're just going to go simple. Does From Russia with Love live in your top tier, middle tier, or bottom tier of the series, and why?
For me, very much top, because as I think it was Bill said at the beginning, Sean said, I think, it's very much a Cold War thriller, and in a way that none of the other Bond films is, and it's not really an action film at all, and in a way, it's it's a thriller prior to action movies actually becoming what they are today. So I prefer the style of this film to the kind of over kinetic energy of the modern action films and the modern Bond films. It's if they could return to it in a way that if they could return to this style in a way that didn't mean throwing everything away, then I'd like to do it, but I can't really see how it's possible because it would just be it would mean turning back the clock, and I think people's expectations wouldn't be up for that.
Do you think Casino Royale is probably one of the closest film that comes to it in terms of style in that format of the recent last, 30 years?
Possibly, yes.
Sorry, just to jump in there. I think 30 years, yes. I think the closest one after it altogether, there would probably be Living Daylights for me.
Can I go? Top tier for me, it's actually my number one. And I think, as I said earlier, I think it's like a really good film version of Fleming's World. And you know what? You probably couldn't do it after 1963. It was just, the timing was just great. But I don't think you could do it. If you tried to do it today, you'd have to add some outrageous action sequence to it, similar to Casino Royale in 2006. So
yeah.
All right, Sean, we got 2 votes for top tier. How are you going to put this one?
I hate this question, James. I really hate this question so much.
I'm going to hold people's feet to the fire on this.
There's no doubt that From Russia with Love is a wonderfully, terrifically made movie. It's absolutely amazing. And I think if this were the only James Bond movie, if they didn't make any others, it would be held in really quite high regard, and that we hold classic films like Casablanca and stuff like that. I think it would be up there. However, I'm a millennial with quite a short attention span, and I like my silly James Bond films. And so just personally in the ranking of James Bond, it would probably usually sit somewhere in the middle, just because it's one I kind of don't just throw on. When I watch it, I think it's brilliant and I have a great time, and I think this is an incredibly competent film, but it's not a go-to for me. I kind of have to be in the mood to watch it.
Totally fair, and all rankings are personal. So, all right, so that's 2 thumbs up and 1 mid-tier. That's pretty good.
Yeah, mid-tier. It's a great. I'm not saying it's not a good movie. It's a brilliant movie. It's just, sometimes I like to put Tomorrow Never Dies on more and turn my brain off.
Right.
It's not everyone's cup of tea, which is fine.
Well, thank you guys. And if you are venturing out into the cinema in the UK this weekend, we hope you enjoy From Russia with Love. And whether you've heard this before you've gone in or you've come out, you can email us your opinions of the film and notes and trivia to contact@jamesbondandfriends.com. And we'll see you next week for Goldfinger.